ladies and lesbians.
Who are you calling a lady?
So I'm Kate Barker and I'm the Managing Director of LGBT Alliance. I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming out. It's just amazing to see everybody. And isn't it amazing to have a women-owned space? Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about self-ID. Now, it's clearly a huge issue for all women, but particularly for lesbians. And the hope for tonight is that not just you're going to be inspired by everything that everybody says and energised by it, but that we're all going to be able to go away and be really armed with better arguments and with the kind of information we need to be able to go out beyond our circle and go into the wider world and convince people of our position. So the panel itself is going to last an hour, and there's 20 minutes for questions, so get your questions all queued up and ready. And I'm going to do a brief introduction to our absolutely amazing, fantastic panel here. First, of course, Tonje Gjevjon. So, Tonje is an artist, a musician, a writer, she's an activist. My favourite thing about you, though, is obviously that you've been on the Eurovision Song Contest. So, AJ, you're a poet, you're a writer, you're an activist, you're a social commentator, and you're a voice for disaffected young lesbians, and I think an increasingly powerful voice that's really making a difference. Joe. So, Professor Joe Phoenix. Just having an amazing impact in everything you do, really, really making a huge difference. So Joe came out in 1979 in Texas. Yeah, die-hard lesbian, politically savvy, and she has a spectacular collection of glasses. Paula Boulton. So Paula is the ultimate lesbian networker, an all-round creator of good things, and she's an activist and a musician and far too many other things to include in a short intro. So I think we're going to start with you, Tonje, and hear your story.
Hi. Yeah, I think I'm gonna start just to talk a little bit about my background. I was like lots of you, I guess, a tomboy when I was a child, and I was misgendered all the times, and actually I was called the boy. I had one passion, and it was playing football, and I was really, really good at it. So when I was 11 years old, and I was just playing with the boys, I told my father that I want my own team, girl team, in football. So me and him, we made this team, and I could continue playing football. And of course there was a lot of other lesbian kids that were playing football, so we met when under competitions. And also I was this generation that I wasn't presented for porn. I was left without it, so we met and we could be like children are, like innocently trying to figure out how to kiss and things like that. Yeah. So, and then came puberty, and actually it was an adult human, I think it was a female, that told me, Tonje, you are getting breasts, you need to put your t-shirt on. And I was a bit embarrassed and ashamed because I hadn't noticed, and I also thought it was unfair because all the boys were playing without the t-shirt. And the puberty, it was really terrible, and I know that if I had been young today, I most certainly would have tried to get rid of my breasts and been one of the worst trans activists ever, because I was very stubborn, and if somebody was mean to my friend, I would have stood up and been on the wrong side. So, and I actually heard about, understood what was happening, because it was a socialist conference for women in Norway, and Julie Bindel was invited, and then suddenly some trans activists were telling the women in the Socialist Party that she's a transphobic woman, so they de-invited her, and I thought something must be really wrong when the women in the Socialist Party are no platforming a voice like Julie Bindel, who is like the voice on how damaging prostitution is for women. So this was my first something is really wrong, and then I started writing articles, and the rapid onset gender dysphoria parents contacted me, and I was at a secret meeting at Karolinska Hospital, and when I heard their stories of how they were not able to protect their children from irreversible damage, I think that's the worst thing you can ever experience, not to protect the ones you love. So then I started to write more about it. But now I'm going to do my actual presentation, so I start with the beginning. My name is Tonje Gjevjon. I'm an artist, a woman, and a lesbian. I have been under investigation for breach of the Norwegian hate speech law. Yet yesterday morning I received a letter from the police saying, and now I quote, "You are hereby notified that the case against you has been dismissed because no criminal offense is considered proven. This means that the investigation strongly suggests that nothing punishable has happened." And my response to this is that that's good, and it shows that we must use our freedom of speech while we have it. And to reclaim our rights as women and as lesbians, we need to react and to point out the injustice of the law of self-identification. And as Christina Ellingsen has said in her brilliant call to action, use your rights or lose your rights. Right now we are still able to speak out, and I will encourage everyone to do so if you can, wherever you are in the world, if it's safe to do so. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, my principles, and my actions. I do not believe in the concept of gender identity. And as an artist, a woman, and a lesbian, I have experienced the culture of abuse developed and legitimized in the wake of the legislation of gender identity. In Norway, hate speech laws combined with self-ID are being abused by trans activists and TQ+ organizations to harass others, especially women. And Norway has the most extreme self-ID law in the world. It allows children from they are 7 years old to change their legal sex without any medical examination and with the consent of only one parent. To me, that looks like a law designed to split up the family. And in the past 6 years, I have constantly warned that replacing sex with gender identity in legislation is harmful for children and women's safety. I have published articles, participated in public hearings and debates about sex, gender roles, and sexual orientations. And until 2017, it was actually possible to debate these issues fiercely one moment and then go and have a drink with people you disagree with later. But when the second gender self-ID was, but the second gender self-ID was introduced into Norwegian legislation in 2016, it all ended. Instead, the slogan was "no debates," and these mantras. I understand this I understand that it is the same with Stonewall here. But it's not just about ending debate, it's also about attempt to remove the livelihood of LGBT and women's campaigners. As a professional artist, I have made and produced films, videos, performances, visual art and song commenting on the issue related to women, lesbians, the female body, and the LGBTQ movement since 1999. So let me tell you a few stories about some of the things that have happened to me and my wife. In 2018, I was forbidden to perform a song called Vagina Anthem by the very art institution that had invited me to participate in the exhibition. The curator phoned me a few days before the opening and said that the management had decided that the lyrics in Vagina Anthem could hurt or offend men who did not have a vagina. And added that they could not ensure my safety. So my lesbian performance group, Hungry Hearts, and I was cancelled. In December 2021, a gallery owner told me that no artist could be associated with me and that I am essentially blacklisted. She told me this in a phone call as part of her explanation of cancelling me from the exhibition I was to create at her venue. In March 2022, trans activists contacted my wife's employees in what I see as an attempt to silence and destroy me. My wife had stood by my side to protect me. Sorry. My wife had stood by my side to protect me at the Women's Day demonstration on the 8th of March. And here, Women's Declaration Norway, and I had the audacity to carry a placard with the text, "Trans women are men." My wife was accused of spreading hate and deemed unfit for her job by merely being present near the placard, near this placard, standing next to me for protection. My wife has worked hard since 1999 to build her career, and this has led to her being a professor in nursing. And when the trans activist tried to destroy her career, something inside me broke. I have been asked on this Lesbian Not Criminal road trip how my family has taken it. And when my mother was a child, she was a victim of mob mentality, and she's frightened for me. And for my wife to experience the way I'm being handled by the TQ mob does harm. And it does harm to us all. The National LGBTQI Plus organization has given about 30 million Norwegian kroner a year. That's about 2.5 million pounds. And it's given by the government to these organizations, which should in fact be called TQ Plus organizations. And they employ heterosexual men who identify as women, lesbians and mothers. And these men also educate and advise young gays and lesbians. In Norwegian schools, children are taught that gender identity is a universal truth, a new reality. Women and men in Norway, academics, biologists, doctors, parents, children, students, and politicians who have the guts to talk about it, argue and discuss issues attached to the legislation of gendered identities are targeted by the TQ plus mob. And lesbians, like us, who oppose the idea that men can be lesbians, are labeled as transphobes, TERFs and hateful Nazi bigots. It's a bit like when the lesbians in the 70s were labeled as frigid man-haters. It is deeply homophobic and misogynistic, and it does considerable harm. For me, this abuse is worse than serving time in jail for defending the rights of lesbians. And I have been reported for a breach of Norwegian hate crime law. And what I did was that I provoked this action with a specific aim. I wanted to show that the new law had removed protection from lesbians. We no longer had protection from sexual harassment or hate speech. And when Parliament included gender identity in the law, it had no doubt unintentionally exposed lesbians to sexual harassment, discrimination, and incitement. We must be able to call out the behavior of those who discriminate against us without having to be careful of the words we use. Interestingly, while I was under police investigation, prominent trans activists objected. They claimed that they didn't want me to be investigated or convicted for emphasizing that men can be lesbians. They several times contacted police officers and asked them to drop the case and the charges. Maybe it started to dawn on them that the picture of a lesbian artist taken to court for calling out heterosexual men fetishizing lesbianism is not a good look for TQ plus organizations. It is convincing children that they might be born in the wrong body that should be illegal, not pointing out the vast and destructive consequences of this new belief system. The Norwegian Self-ID Act encourages pervasive discrimination against lesbians and women in general. All this in contrary to international law protecting women's rights. Self-ID law is irrational. It is an encroachment of freedom of expression that affects everyone, but especially women, lesbians, and artists, and the opportunity for academics to carry out their work, which is based in facts, evidence, and critical thinking. Thank goodness for the great news from Scotland. A leader brought down by trying to force a bill on the public that they just don't want. Let's hope leaders of other countries take this as a warning. In Norway, things are allowed to progress without much opposition. All I can say to you is please keep fighting to make sure what has happened in my country does not happen here. Just the last thing here. In my collaboration with Paula Boulton, I saw the footage of 66,000 suffragettes. And we are looking to you, Turf Island, to keep it together, avoid splintering. We are adult human females and should act like adults, not children. And let's do it again, all of us, regardless of our difference. We need to join in a march with 66,000 women to oppose self-ID and the law attached to self-ID. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonje. That was really moving, wasn't it? And really instructive. Thanks so much. Right. Hello, AJ.
Hey, I'm AJ. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this panel with such amazing women. I never thought I would be on a panel because I'm an absolute introvert and I prefer to be at the back of the room, hidden. But we are in crazy times where men can be lesbians, so there we go. I want to talk about self-ID, but from a slightly different angle. I want to talk about disappearing lesbians, because self-ID is not just turning men into lesbians, it's also turning lesbians into men at an alarming rate. And every time a young lesbian decides to opt out of the life, we lose a bit of ourselves, a bit of our culture, and a bit of our history. And I want to protect and preserve what we have now for the next generation, just as you lot protected it for me. And one way to protect and preserve what's ours is to bridge the generational gap and learn from our elders. I won't drop names, but I recently had the pleasure of spending a few days with some older lesbians, and hearing their stories and wisdom made me smile and laugh and determined to save it. It being the thing that I think these young women are missing. Now I'd like to skip back to the day that I peaked, because it involves lesbians and disappearing lesbians. It was Pride 2018. I hadn't been in ages because it has turned into a corporate circle jerk and a fetish party, which I had no interest in, but one of my friends was in the parade, so she dragged me down. Incidentally, this friend works for the Metropolitan Police, and she works with a man who self-IDs as a woman on one day and as a man on other days, and he has 2 warrant cards, and she says it's a fucking nightmare, as you can all imagine. But that's not the point of my story. Anyway, at some point during the show, there was a murmur made its way through the crowd that there was a protest at the start. My immediate thought was, oh no, the religious lot have turned up to tell us we're all going to hell. Because who else would protest Pride in 2018? And more importantly, who would have the balls? It turns out it wasn't balls. I didn't see anything, and it was soon over, and my mind moved on to other things. The topic of the protest wasn't mentioned again until a few hours when my group of friends hooked up with another bunch of people that I didn't know. Among the group were 2 women in their late teens to early 20s. They were clearly a couple and a lesbian couple. They were both pretty good, big girls and hairy, and both had matching bikini and pants on. The only reason I mention this is because I've been very big and very skinny in the past, and I've never been that confident with my body. Also, I'm a very hairy woman, and when I was their age, I absolutely was not confident in it at all. So seeing them straight away, I was like, yeah, awesome women. Yeah, so I liked them straight away. They were friendly and chatty, and we had some common interests, and it was easy to talk to them. And for me, that is quite hard because I'm a very shy person. But we got on straight away. And I remember very clearly thinking, the young ones are okay. Little did I know. It was these 2 women who mentioned the process that I had forgotten all about. They said it was a bunch of bigoty TERFs who were filled with hate. They went on a 5-minute rant, but they never once mentioned the word lesbian or women. But they were very obvious. But it was obvious they really despised whoever these people were. I could feel the hate coming off them. This was my first time hearing the word TERF, and little did I know, I would soon be self-IDing as one. That was pretty much all that happened that day, and I went home, but the next morning I woke up thinking about the protest. So I went on Google and I found out it was a bunch of lesbians, which I couldn't quite understand why lesbians would be protesting Pride and why anyone would have an issue if they did, and I really couldn't understand the hate that these 2 women had for these lesbians. That group was Get the L Out, by the way, if you don't know. Yes, thank you. Yeah. My next stop on the podcast, my next stop was to find a podcast by Angela Seward about the cotton ceiling, which is another term I've never heard of and I've not been a victim of, but I recognise as true straight away, because the old line of just try dick, you might like it, has turned into just try lady dick or you're a bigot. That could fuck right off. Yeah, by the end of the podcast, I was a fully peaked TERF, and I was not turning back. But I want to say I was never a TRA in the first place. I just didn't realise people actually meant trans women or women. That is insane. But anyway, as if that wasn't enough, a few months later, I run into these 2 women again. Neither of them had breasts anymore. Neither were lesbians, and neither were women. They were both now men. Gay men, proud gay couple. Yeah, that was a bit of a mind. And as you know, I'd already peaked by then, so I knew this was happening. I just didn't expect for it to come face to face with me so fast. I said hello and I wished them well, but I couldn't hang around with them long because the scars on their chests were just screaming help to me, and nobody else seemed to be able to hear it. Plus, it was a very queer crowd, so I thought my turfy thoughts were leaking out of me, and I wasn't quite as confident as I am now. I think about those two women a lot, and I hope they're well, but I've not seen them since. But I have seen women like them, women screaming at events such as Standing for Women, women protesting me. They call me bigot and turf in their robotic way. They say they hate me, but they don't really know why. It's just what they do. They go out and shout at some turfs or some fun. But I think they're sick of it, just as much as we are. They just don't have anywhere else to go. They don't have anything else to do. This is the whole culture. It's transactivism. When I was younger, I had LGBT group clubs to go to that were not school related, by the way. I found them outside school. They had appropriate events, and when I was older, there were lesbian bars and clubs to go to, but they don't exist anymore. All the spaces the young lesbians have are activist spaces. The clubs are queer as hell, and the one permanent lesbian bar in London, which is called She Bar, is a dingy little depressing hole in the ground, that has men in it as well, so it's not a lesbian bar. But there is hope. I don't know how many of you are aware of a night called It's on tomorrow? Yay! But the night is not a turfy night. Turfy women go, including myself, but so do a lot of younger women who are possibly on the gender train, if I'm judging a book by its cover. But once we're in the club, we're all just women having fun with no worries, no politics, no teams, just women. And that's what we need more of. We need to be visible as lesbians, the way that the Get the L Out did, with the in-your-face, unapologetic activism, but we also need to be visible lesbians away from turfing. We need to multitask. And it may have to start off semi-underground, which is really frustrating because we shouldn't have to start again and be underground again. But we can do it because we've done it before. We just need to work together, and most importantly, we need to bridge that generational gap so we know how it was done the first time. Young women, can I just say, by the way, I don't consider myself a young woman anymore, so this baton needs to be passed on to young women that I can see here. But young women need to learn, they need to work together, and we need to be creative, which are all things that women are excellent at. So that's what I want everyone to start thinking about. How can you make a space for young women away from gender ideology and away from turfing? How can you use your skills and resources to build what we need right now? And how can you bridge that generational gap? So I want you to look around you. If you're an elder lesbian or woman, I want you to find a young woman in this audience and get her digits. And see how you can help her, find what skills she has and raise her up, because that's what we really need to do. We need to bring women into the movement, and the women that are already in the movement, we need to support them, we need to empower them in the old school way, not getting your fucking breasts out, I don't mean that. And we need to use our resources to elevate them, because they are the future of this movement.
Thank you so much. I mean, I would say the youth and age thing is relative. I mean, the main reason I like working at LGB Alliance is I feel like an absolute teenager. But so youthful. So, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Really good.
I have no idea how I can follow that. That was superb. I've written something, I may not stick to it, forgive me, and I'm kind of assuming I'm speaking to the converted already, that there's not a lot of people in the room who support self-identification. Would I be right? Maybe? Yeah. Okay, so what can I say that hasn't already been said and hasn't already been said 1,000,000 times over since about 2017, 2018, as far as I can see? Arguments against self-identification. Some of this is going to sound a bit dry and academic. I have to do that because I have like a professor in front of my name, and some of it isn't. So here comes a dry and academic bit. Arguments against self-ID range from the brackets, largely feminist, arguments about male violence, about what we are when we are women together, and it veers towards understanding us as a class, a sex class. That for many of us who are not so young, I'm not so young anymore. I came out in '79, I was 15 years old, and to my ears, when I hear women as a sex class, I remember books from the 1980s when we were writing about that and talking about that. So it veers towards, you know, the political statements about women as a sex class, to arguments about same-sex attraction, and of course, the thing that sits underneath it all is the absolute irrationality and the implausibility of identifying into or out of a biological class. I mean, I have, you know, it's going to sound silly, but I've got 2 Jack Russells. One of my Jack Russells identifies as a bull mastiff. I tell her all the time she is not. I tried to explain genetics, it just doesn't work, we have a communication problem. But there is a certain irrationality, because underneath the self-identification, what we're talking about are biological classes, or biological categories. So, we also have this thing that, Aja, you rightly said, and as did you, Tonje, about the idea of a gender identity. Now, to me, gender identity has so many different meanings, because my meanings about gender and about identity go back 30 years. And certainly a lot of my work has also been involved in thinking about what this notion of identity is. And the one thing that we can say about identity, I mean, we can say this with a certain degree of certainty, is that identity is never fixed. Identity moves contextually, it moves through time. You know, at this moment, I identify as an academic. In a few minutes, I'm going to identify just as a person and a lesbian. I'm going to drop the academic stuff. But it moves all the time, and it's a bit like gossamer, and it's very changeable. And all it has to be said, all of those arguments are fairly obvious. It's not hard to break them down, and we've been doing it, various people with much longer and much more effectively than I have. We've been doing it for a while. So what can I add? Well, you know, I'm going to make a few personal observations here. I came out in 1979 in Texas. I keep saying that because before I came out, when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, we used to play a game called Smear the Queer. Right, it was a neighborhood game. Whoever had the football, there were no end zones, there were no goals, there were no teams. Whoever had the football, you simply beat the shit out of, literally. So that was the world I grew up in. And of course, it was only after I came over here in about 1982 that I thought, hang on a second, that wasn't very good. Shouldn't have been playing that game. But 1982, I arrived in this country. I was out. I was in Shropshire. Has anyone ever been to Shropshire? That's extraordinary. There's nothing in Shropshire, right? Nothing. Yeah, you're all here. But and in 1982, there really was nothing. There was no internet, right? There weren't lesbian clubs. There weren't lesbian bars. There was something called a lesbian contact magazine. Those of you who know anything about prostitution will know that before the internet, prostitution was done through contact magazines, right? You may not know that. Now you know that. Lesbians found each other through the same technology that was being used for what were, in effect, illicit trades, at least in Shropshire at that point. Anyway, I was 18 years old, 19 years old. I wanted to get a hold of lesbians. I didn't know where to go. I saw this telephone number, right? It was called Samaritans. Phone if you need help, right? So I phoned the Samaritans in 1982. In Shropshire, I said, hi, I've just come from Texas. I come from Houston. There's a lot of lesbians in Houston. Can you help me find the lesbians in Shropshire? Oh, well, that's a whole nother story. I was in Shropshire because I was kindly invited to leave America and given a one-way plane ticket to anywhere in the world I wanted to go. In fact, this may actually be a story you might be interested in. I was a young lesbian. I had left home. I got into a lot of trouble. My father, who worked for a company called Brown and Root, which is an oil company, he worked in their research and development department, had a morals clause connected to his employment, which applied to the family, right? And because I was getting into trouble and I was an out young lesbian trolleying around having a lot of fun, my father basically said, "You know your British passport?" So I held a British passport. He said, "Would you like to use it? I'm going to give you a one-way plane ticket to anywhere you want to go." Right, so I had some distant kin in Shropshire. I ended up with them.
So you're a refugee, really, a lesbian refugee?
Well, yeah, I am a lesbian refugee. Oh, I like that. I feel a song coming on. Anyway, back to the Samaritans. So I found the Samaritans. I say, "Hi, can you help me find the women?" I didn't use the L word, right? I actually used the word women. "Will you help me find a women-only space?" Guess where they sent me?
Convent.
I got sent to the WI. So one Wednesday evening, I showed up to the address that they gave, wearing my best, finest lesbian finery on my little Susie B120 motorcycle. I don't know if you ever saw them. They were little two-stroke motorcycles. Walked into a room and found a whole group of middle-aged women talking about jam. I walked out again. Just walked straight out again. All right, so I had lots and lots of furtive attempts to try and find the lesbians. I could not find the lesbians until 1985. I had a very sad time for 3 years in Shropshire. Yeah. I go to Bristol University to do a sociology degree. At least it's an ology. So that will age me, that joke. I go to Bristol University to do a sociology degree, and I encounter these incredible women who are doing this protest at a place called Greenham Common. Oh, holy shit, I never turned back again. That was just like a kid in a candy store. I had a wonderful time. And of course, that moment, the mid-1980s, everyone who came out then knew that actually we were coming out against a backdrop of a couple of hundred years, if not a couple of millennia, of being silenced, of being invisible, of having to find a code to speak to each other, to recognize each other, to have some underground way of making contact with each other. But in the 80s we had, and some of you will remember this, Stoner McTavish, the books. Yeah, Murder in the English Department, Desert of the Hearts, Section 28, 29, 30, I don't know which one it was. Yeah, 28. And of course this was all, against a backdrop of the pornographication of lesbians as well, because all of that stuff about male violence was still going on anyway. All right, so fast forward to now, which is 35, 40 years later. I find myself sitting in meetings where I'm listening to young women, young lesbian academics largely, talking about being afraid to show that they have Julie Bindell's Feminism for Real Women on their bookshelf. Right? I talk to young lesbian academics who are afraid to challenge their LGBTQI++ staff network. I talk to young lesbian academics who are afraid to publicly support me, right? Publicly. They'll support me privately. I understand them. They have a career to make, and they've seen what happened to people like Kathleen Stock, and they saw what happened to people like me. So yeah, I understand their fear. I really, really do. I don't understand the fear of the senior staff. They have nothing to lose. And as far as I'm concerned, any of the currently gay male or lesbian people with professors in front of their names who aren't part of the other side, but are just sitting by quietly, I think there's, I'm going to say this on a camera, I think there's a special place in hell for them. So, just to wind up, we are living in scary times, but I think they're less scary at the moment. I think, as Aqua Reindorf said a couple of weeks ago, the age of no debate is over. The fact that we are sitting here right now and there isn't a group of people outside, right, is a testimony to actually how far things have moved in a relatively short space of time. And I think I'm about out of time, so I want to just end. I'm going to butcher this. Anyone who knows any good Spanish will know that I'm just going to kill this phrase now. I want to end with a simple phrase. Where it comes to self-identification, all I have to say is no pasarán. You shall not pass.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Joe. Fantastic. Paula.
There we go. I'm going to stand up, sorry, because I've been sitting down too long. I'd like to start with some audience participation.
Oh no, you don't.
It's bad for the people. Okay, that's fine, it's bad for the people.
Oh, the video. I thought you said the people. It's bad for the people. Okay, I'll start again. I'd like to start with some audience participation.
Oh yes, you do.
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, no. No, I'd like to invite you to relax for a moment and shut your eyes. Yes. So just relax and close your eyes and bring to mind your perfect partner, your heart's desire. And hold that image, enjoy it. Keep it to yourself.
I've got too many.
Well, you can have multiples. I didn't say we had to be monogamous even. Anyway, what turns you on is, after all, an entirely private matter. Now I want you to imagine someone who you couldn't possibly be physically attracted to because of their sex. Imagine being told that you need to work on broadening your sexual preference to be all-encompassing. Open your eyes. I call that conversion practice. As lesbians, if we fail to broaden up, we're branded as sexual racists by the CEO of the very organisation set up originally to advocate for those who share our sexual orientation. In fact, the name we used for centuries to describe ourselves is now being used to mean something entirely different. Welcome to being a lesbian in 2023. Now, if you have no doubts, and I am looking at the most self-assured roomful of lesbians I've ever seen in my life, so I imagine most of you will fall into this category, you will hold your own, and like Anne Lister in 1821, you know who you are, you may respond eloquently to this nonsense with, I love and only love the fairer sex, and thus beloved by them in turn, my heart revolts from any love but theirs. You may be affronted, dismiss it all as nonsense, or, God forbid, be offended, but you will carry on loving who you love regardless. Operating under the radar, as we always used to. Secret meetings, underground networks, away from the withering glare of the misogynistic patriarchal spotlight. But now imagine you're a young, gender non-conforming teenage girl, struggling through puberty, desperate to escape the hyperfeminisation and hypersexualisation all around you. Perhaps you identify as non-binary. A bit of a breathing space? Or perhaps you reject the mighty phallus and declare that you are a lesbian. Off you go to a shiny, fun, well-funded queer or LGBT WTF youth group. And that's for those who are different. You're home at last. You say, you fancy girls. They ask you, are you sure you're not actually a boy trapped in a girl's body? More conversion pressure. If you stick to your guns, you get the sexual racist treatment. Pressured to accept male bodies into your dating pool and told that you're transphobic if you don't. To those young women, we say a lesbian is an exclusively same-sex attracted adult human female, and we don't do dick. We're protected under the Equality Act on the basis of sexual orientation. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two completely separate things. Forced teaming isn't working. They've never been comfortable bedfellows. So let's call an end to the meaningless, ever-expanding acronym which just allows people to tick box their way through diversity requirements. Address each group individually. We're lesbians, not LGBTQ women. We need to be visible and audible so that those emerging lesbians know that they are okay just exactly as they are, so that they can see what a future lesbian life might look like. Of course, a lot of us had no role models when we came out, but we all found our way. Can we hope that young lesbians will do the same? We weren't up against the transborg, an ideology and propaganda telling us that we were something else entirely. A young 14-year-old said to a friend of mine recently that she'd decided she was trans. Last time we spoke, you said you were a lesbian, she challenged. Well, I don't know how to be one. I mean, what do lesbians even wear? I know what trans people look like. That's in a little town in the middle of England. I also want to mention the issue, as we've heard very eloquently put, of the number of lesbians, especially butch lesbians, who are transitioning. So I just wanted to do a hands up. Who knows a lesbian who has transitioned? I think that's a really sad thing, personally. So that's 3 types of invisible right there. Youngsters who get diverted, established lesbians gone underground again, and lesbians opting to transition. But there is growing resistance, and we're fighting back in numerous ways. One way I resist is in a political party. So having been a founder signatory of Labour Women's Declaration with Kerry and others, any other LWDers here? Just, yeah, oh, several, here we go, jolly good. The working group for the Labour Women's Declaration had a meeting, and it occurred to me that one way we could organise, you know, we had councillors getting together, regional groups, there was all sorts of little subgroups, and I thought, why don't we get the lesbians together? And that's how it started. Mary was there. Mary's here as well, yeah, Mary was one of the few. I mean, you know, there's bound to be a lot of lesbians on the left, you'd think, in the largest political party in Europe. We're the leaflet hander-outerers and the door knockers and the tea makers and the just women that get on and do it. And then there's a trade union movement. Masses of lesbians, you would have thought. So anyway, we founded Lesbian Labour in November 2020. And if you've not heard about us, just look up lesbianlabour.com and you'll find out all about us. Now, the Labour Party. Yes, wouldn't it be nice to go with the Labour Party and for you all to go, yay! That would have been how it was once, wouldn't it?
Jeremy was there.
Well, yes. Now then, there's another story. It is a slow, tortuous process doing battle with a party which is still a Stonewall diversity champion. And it still receives training from gendered intelligence. And according to the news just the other day, it may end up giving membership to the ex-Tory Ian Anderson, the chair of Stonewall. Karen and Gala Smith, no. Loads of us excluded or, you know, has anybody been expelled from the party? There we go, we've got one there. Anybody else been investigated? Anti-Semitism and hostility to gender reassignment was my crime. I was found innocent, rather like Tonje, that there was no crime. But you know, it's the process, isn't it, that's the punishment. So, oh, you left, yeah, that's another thing. Hands up if you've left the Labour Party. Look at that, Kerry. Bloody hell, look at that. Can somebody take a photo of that and send it, please? Because that's what we're saying. Labour is losing women and Labour is losing lesbians. That is amazing. That's completely floored me. Sorry? Left? Anybody still in there? Oh my God, look at that. Well, look at each other and make friends later. The thing is, it's our party. Socialism doesn't belong to them. It's ours. You know, and anyway, I understand if you've gone. I've been waiting to be chucked out. Anyway, carrying on, our party, whether it's past, present or future, is a party which has made a manifesto commitment to do the impossible and maintain the Equality Act 2010 with its single-sex exemptions, whilst modernising the GRA. We wait with bated breath to hear how that will work in practice, and Kerry and others behind the scenes are doing all we can to actually get them to the place where they have to say, this is impossible. So a big round of applause now. As lesbians in Labour, we are up against LGBT plus Labour. They are the affiliated organisation, and they refuse to work with us. To quote from their letter, your public priorities reflect the priorities of only a negligible proportion of lesbians in Labour. Our most senior lesbian politician is, of course, Angela Eagle. She has yet not once responded to our requests to meet. And, I mean, it happens to be a partner, but that's, you know, that's a personal matter. Maria Exall is now the president of the TUC, and she accuses us of being a gateway drug to the far right. I quote, and is maintaining a no debate stance. So it's also not right that one trade union after the other unthinkingly adopts self-ID with consultation. Is anybody in a trade union that's adopted self-ID? Oh, that's good, there's not many hands up there. Now, is that because you're not in a trade union though? Ooh, complicated question. I'll leave that there. If you are in any body, you know, body of people, I mean, not in your own body, argue it. Just argue it. Don't accept it. Anyway, we're all meant to pretend we're one big, happy, ever-expanding, inclusive rainbow family. Well, we're not. They have photos of the rainbow. We have the right to organise autonomously as lesbians in separate spaces in the time-honoured Labour movement tradition of caucuses. They are by their very nature exclusive, and that's okay. We don't want men in lesbian spaces. It's necessary to our survival to have male-free spaces. You cannot surgically remove male advantage, entitlement or privilege. Hormones may decrease testosterone levels, but they do not reduce learned behaviour from lived experience growing up as a man in a man's world. So no thank you, Stonewall. No thank you, Stonewall and Co, for rewriting our sexual boundaries. We will keep them. And we are, lesbians, let me have you repeat after me, exclusively same-sex attracted adult human females. What are we?
Exclusively same-sex attracted adult human females.
That wouldn't work on a dating site, would it? They'd have clicked or swiped left by the time they'd read all of that. Anyway, the need to gather with our own kind is as culturally necessary for us as it is for any other group in society. It's not all about dignity, privacy, all of that safety, all of the women's issues that we're fighting on. That matters, but for us, it's a cultural necessity. And we need to gather with our own kind, and we want a seat at the table on that basis. In Scotland, Scottish Labour would gain massive votes by being reasonable about sex-based rights, and who knows? Nicola's gone. Anything could happen there. In Wales, Mark Drakeford has actually said he wants to follow her example. He may follow her example and resign, you never know. But yeah, he wants to bring in self-ID, and the plan launched last week in Wales is actually a Stonewall document. He has not consulted with anybody that is not part of the Stonewall and Co. So, I mean, there's loads of lesbians. There's LGB Alliance Cymru doing the job, there's Lesbian Labour Cymru, there's Merched Cymru, they're all doing what they can. If you have any Welsh contacts, they need help, because they'll be next. And who else is next? We know what happened in Norway. We got a message from one of the Women's Declaration International contacts in Malta, where self-ID is law. This was a message from her, from Rosa. We can no longer have lesbian-only spaces. Young lesbians who are not feminine are being brainwashed and told that they're men, with the unnecessary hormones and surgery that comes with it. Those who regret it are too scared to speak. Young lesbians no longer know what a lesbian is because they're taught to include men. This is lesbian erasure. It's conversion therapy. Conform to stereotypes or you will be made to. Please do not do the same in the UK. Good luck. Now, finally, I just want to finish talking briefly about lesbian networking. Many of us here, I'd like a show of hands, are veterans of the women's peace movement. Not just you, I'm sure. Hands up. Anybody involved? Yeah, right, okay. If I say Greenham, do we know what Greenham is?
Yeah.
Jolly good, all right. Now, the threats in those days were a shoot-to-kill policy, so we're not afraid of a few blue and pink hair twats out on the street shouting at us. You know, there's no comparison, and they don't understand that. Anyway, we also know how to weave a web. We are the spinsters, experts at word of mouth, gaydar, secret signals, and it's how we've survived. Organising in small clusters, affinity groups, impossible to find a leader, and therefore impossible to shut us down. And now we have social media as a tool, allowing us to spread internationally. And I personally bow to the goddess that is Zoom. But remember this, 40 years ago, before mobile phones, as you mentioned, we got 30,000 women to Greenham Common. We know how to do it, and we've never had funding. So being hidden and unfunded may be barriers, but that's not going to stop us. I believe in strength in numbers. United we stand, divided we fall. So let's build alliances. Our lesbian revival is underway. Not only do we need to resist erasure, we need to reclaim our roots and rebuild our culture. Now the culture bit comes after the break. You'll be very surprised, and we want you all involved in the next concert. Lots of groups and individuals are doing their part in different spheres. We've got a lesbian immigration support group. There's Lesbian Fight Back. Get the L out was already mentioned. Lesbians on Chairs. Is Julia here? Hey, you're there, right, okay. I mean, Lesbian Rights Alliance. Elaine Hutton was there last night from Lesbian Rights Alliance. There's LGBT Alliance Cymru. Recently, Scottish lesbians formed. Lesbians United in the USA, the Vancouver Lesbian Collective. There's a Lesbian Spaces Initiative regularly at Filia. Proud Lesbians Project. And we have, since lockdown, been meeting fortnightly by Zoom in a thing called Lesbians Under Lockdown. Women from all over the world. The first woman came from Alaska. I don't know how. I mean, you know, being the only gay in the village in Wales is one thing, but the only lesbian in Alaska, Christ. Anyway, she found us, and there's Swedish women, Malta, Australia, Spain, Germany, literally every fortnight, meeting on a Thursday night. You know, and it's safe. You haven't got loonies outside your door. Anyway, camping groups, book groups, lesbian discos. Anyway, we're all moving the struggle forward one step at a time. And we've been doing it for years, some longer than others. I'd like to acknowledge Julia. You were the first at the 2016 Thinking Differently conference. First time I heard of this nonsense. You know, and the canaries in the coal mine. Let's face it, we're the canaries in the coal mine. But we've built strength and resilience. I'd like to say, sadly, that internationally our sisters have a different battle. Remember that in 69 countries, homosexuality is still illegal. And I was going to finish there, but Tonje and I got in a taxi on the way here. And the driver was from Edinburgh, and he was leaving taxi driving after he let us out of the cab, because Uber have taken over and the Mayor of London is ruining black cabs. Anyway, he discovered we were lesbians, didn't take much. And I mean, it was amazing. He was a film cameraman, really, and he'd been doing gay pride for years. And he started telling us all sorts of stories, but the sad story was this. He said that there had been two women in the back of a cab, and one of them was a black African woman, and one was a white English woman, is what they'd said to him. Do you mind if we hold hands? And he said, well, it's none of my business. And they said, we were in a taxi recently, and the taxi driver was an African man from a country where homosexuality was illegal, and he actually took those women, threw them out against the wall, drove off and left them in the middle of the night. What he didn't realise is one of those women was a lawyer. And she was going to get him. So, I thought that was worth sharing with you. Anyway, my real, from the bottom of my heart call to all of you here is, please put our differences aside and work together for a safe and fair world for lesbians everywhere. Thank you.
Paula, that was fantastic, thank you. And thank you to all the contributors. I think it's just an astonishing breadth of stories there. Fantastic, thank you. We're going to have a Q&A, but just before I do, you may have seen Kate Harris sneak on with a note from me. You're probably wondering if it's something exciting, and it's not, so I'll tell you what it is, in case I forget at the end. So one says, everybody, can you please write in our Lesbian Not Criminal Tour? We've got a booklet and we're just collecting messages from people who've come along. Number two, if you take a photo of yourself in front of our stand, could you send it to us if you'd like to go on our website, because we're trying to collect pictures of all the women that we've met as we've toured around. It'd be great to see you on there. And number three, and these are Kate's words, we don't want to encourage you to donate, but we have a large deposit behind the bar, so it'll really help if you drink a lot, because then we won't have to pay the extra. So I'll just put that in case I forget at the end. So we're going to do a Q&A now. Kate, would you like to volunteer to be the microphone person? Right. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, it's green. That was incredible. Number two. Oh no. Yeah, that was incredible. Thank you very much to all of you. But my worry is that it's not just Labour, it's all the political parties. I mean, we know about the SNP, we know about Welsh Labour, and shouldn't we be in Britain organising and mobilising, you know, across party lines? Because I think some of the parties are worse than Labour, if that's possible. The Greens are insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Tell you what, let's take 3 questions and then we'll loop back to them and decide who's best to answer. So, number 2.
You talked about putting differences aside, and on the back of the previous question, much in the same vein, has any thought been given to seeking out more moderate members on the right who do seem to support the objections to gender identity?
We've got question number 3. Don't be shy.
I'd just like to know how things got to the situation that they have in Norway. What's the sort of political context? How was gender ID adopted there so rapidly?
Okay, so the first 2 questions were kind of linked. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I didn't actually say, but we started Women Uniting as well a couple of years ago, and all the political parties are actually doing that. There are gender critical women in all of them, and we were having monthly meetings, and from that there are, I mean, the Lib Dems is Liberal Voice for Women, and they turned up last night as well. They've now got a Liberal LGB forum. So that's really good. And then the Conservatives for Women are absolutely amazing. They are literally right in there, lobbying. They look at what's coming up in Parliament, what questions are coming up, and then they'll get together. Kerry and Karen Varley, Conservatives for Women, will then write the answer, and we've got MPs and Lords in place who then, go to the floor and read more or less what's been written. So it's all secret, and I mean, I don't know if I should have said this here anyway, but I don't know what's confidential anymore. But the link-up is great. The Women's Equality Party have got to the stage where they've dissolved, more or less. All of the activists have jumped ship because it's a load of rubbish and it's never going to change. And there's a case going through with the Liberals. Natalie Bird has got a case out against the Liberals. The Green Party, the Green Women, Dawn has got, and Emma have both got cases going through with the Green Party as well. And the only party that had a positive policy on this was the Communist Party, who actually sex-based. Social Democrats do, right? Well, that's one party we never found anybody from. So if you, very good policy. So yeah, that, you know, that's happening. What was the second? There was a linked question. Oh, we're seeking out moderates. Well, there you go. There you go. What we find hard is to find any Tory lesbians. I mean, you know, the Tory party is saying all the right things. Well, it was doing until its recent version, but you know, they are using it as a culture war, and quite a lot of them do genuinely think that self-ID is a load of rubbish. But you've got two teams there: those that know it can win an election, and those who genuinely believe it. But I don't know where the lesbians are. Have you found any Tory lesbians, Kate?
Justin Greening.
Justin Greening. Debbie, is that you sitting there? I can't see.
I'm not. Last time I looked, I wasn't Justine Greening, but I identify as her, obviously.
Yeah.
No, she's lesbian, isn't she?
Tory lesbian.
Tory lesbian, well maybe. Margot James, there you go. We were going to have her on the panel. I don't know.
No, she's not an MP anymore.
Go on, Kate, intercede.
No, which one?
Oh no, you, Harris.
Me?
Yes.
I think this takes us nowhere, the discussion about political parties. I think what we have to do is act as behind the lines saboteurs with every single party. And that's how we we've just destroyed self-ID in Scotland. And we did it by working across party, across generation, across every group you could imagine, because it was provable nonsense. So what we talked about last night in Cardiff was that don't worry about we haven't got the right party, we haven't got proportional representation, we haven't got anything that we want. But what we can do as women and lesbians is every time there's a hustings or a candidate comes to your door, ask them whether they think there is a third sex called rapist.
So the third question was for Tonje, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's I think in the same way in Norway as everywhere else. It's like the avoided press, and has been lobbying and targeting the political, like you have Labour youth, you have a socialistic youth, and then the adult parties, like the parties, they thought it was coming from the grassroots.
Yeah.
So it's and everybody was presented as if it was like this is just a few amount of people and it will make their lives and their quality of their lives much better. It won't affect anyone. So we were all like, okay, that sounds nice. And then we experienced that that wasn't. It did actually affect everybody.
Do you think it's anything to do with the kind of cult of the young, where so many of us want to be sort of liberal and progressive, and we assume that this is the next thing, and the kids will tell us it's kind and nice. Do you think there are a lot of people who feel like that?
Yeah, because they told this narrative that there are like people, and if we include them in like the LGBT community, they will get a much better life. And actually, if they don't get this, if you don't obey to the gender identity, they can do like suicide. So it was like a lot of emotional blackmail, and people. I think people are like just naive. They are thinking as long as it doesn't affect anything, let's just be kind. Mm-hmm. And so it was like in the beginning it was like a kind lamb, and then suddenly it woke up as something a monster. Yeah.
Here she comes.
I'm intrigued by the going underground. I understand it. but isn't it also our duty and responsibility to argue the point based on your own values without fear? Because I do it every single day in every part of my life. And I agree with you, bringing the younger generation on, but not to the exclusion of actually speaking up every day. And I have had trans people who've transitioned and called me out in saying I had an easy life. And I was queer. Well, I'm not queer, I'm a lesbian. And it's those moments that if we actually extract ourselves and don't argue, you're allowing for that voice to become stronger and stronger. And I recognize the Nordic approach. I'm Dutch from origin, and we get taught from a very young age to be accepting.
Yeah.
And that's why through communication we can be accepting, but also stand up for what we think is right, and not just say we need to go underground. I'm sure that's not what you're saying, but I do think we need to also speak up.
Jen, let's look at that.
I completely agree with you. I mean, self-evidently, I completely agree with you. I stood up. One of the things that I wanted to just touch on, slightly segue to the previous question, and then what is our duty? Because I think that's basically what you're saying, is what is our duty, civic duty and political duty. I think it's more than be kind. I think what a lot of young people and a lot of my colleagues and the people that I know in my world are taught is that actually what you want to be part of is the community of the good, the right-minded, because very few of us want to be on the side of the devils. We always want to be on the side of the angels. And it's very easy to take a very superficial reading of all of this and say, well, actually, you know, lesbians are fine now, gay men are fine now, bisexual people are fine now. It's the transgender people's turn, right? So we need to protect them. And from my point of view, when I start to speak out, what I encounter is a lot of people who are afraid to even converse with you. To try and encourage them. That was actually the moment. There was a, what do you call it, a long night of the, a long night. I don't know, whatever you, that, thank you. Yeah, it was just a long night where I sat there and thought,
Dark night of the soul.
That's it, Dark Night of the Soul, thank you. See, I left school at 15 as well, so you know my education's terrible. Yeah, so Dark Night of the Soul, when Kathleen Stock reached out to me and asked me to sign one of the now infamous letters. And I knew that if I did that, my career that I had built for 25 years was going to go in my face. I did that because the people I was thinking about wasn't me. The people I was thinking about were my immediate colleagues, and more than anything else, the students that I would be teaching. Because if you can't stand up for your values when you have a position, then really, like I say, there's just a special place of hell for you.
Ik wilde even zeggen dat ik niet dacht dat ik... no, I won't carry on in Dutch. Underground, I didn't mean we should be underground. I meant that we actually seem to be operating under the radar because nobody knows what we're up to. So I'm not suggesting we do that. But, goed. Dank je wel.
Any question over there?
Just following on from...
Hang on a sec.
Yeah, were there implications for your career after you
Yeah, were there implications for my career? Yeah, I mean, I assumed that people knew who I was. A lot of people don't, you know, and it's my arrogance that I assume that they do. Yeah, I got hounded out of my job. I had probably 4 years of some really nasty harassment. I'm an academic, I was working for the Open University, but because I am bullshit as shit, I basically carried on despite the fact that I was suffering a great deal inside. And after the Maya Forstater ruling came out, I gathered with my friends at the Open University who I knew had gender critical beliefs, and we formed the Open University Gender Critical Research Network and launched it on Twitter.
And then everything went really crazy, really tits up. And there was 360 staff members from the Open University who signed letters against us, and it went on and on and on and on. I ended up actually quite sick with PTSD for a while, and then I resigned because the university refused to do anything about what was happening to me. I'm very pleased to say that on October the 2nd, I will be facing the Open University in an open court of law in which 18 people that the Open University are calling as witnesses will have to respond to why simply saying that rapists should not be in a prison makes me a transphobe.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much to everybody for their contributions. I think it's been such an interesting session. And I think one of the things that underpins everything everybody's been saying is a real sense that we are winning. We're winning. We're making a difference. There have been so many significant things that have happened over the last year or so, and it feels to us like the pace of change is only going to speed up. So I think all we can do is keep talking, keep meeting like this, more evenings like this, I think. So thank you very much, and time to hit the bar.